A week after my husband's funeral, my son and daughter-in-law started pushing me into assisted living, calling it golden years, with voices like poisoned honey. I simply listened, but then a mysterious call from the police shattered their plans and unveiled a chilling secret Victor left behind. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. If you're ready to unravel this family drama, like, share, and let us know where you're listening from. The silence in the grand, old Vance house had grown into a tangible thing, a heavy shroud draped over every familiar object since Victor's funeral a week ago. Eleanor Vance moved through her days in a fog of grief, each step an effort, each breath a painful reminder of the man who was no longer there. His scent still clung faintly to his favorite armchair. The faint echo of his laughter seemed to linger in the sun-drenched library. But the man himself was gone, leaving an aching void. She sat by the window in the parlor, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands, watching the late afternoon sun paint long shadows across the manicured lawn Victor had so loved. Then the shrill, insistent ring of the telephone cut through the quiet. Eleanor startled, her heart leaping into her throat. She rarely received calls anymore. Most condolences had already been offered. She hesitated, then slowly reached for the receiver. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number, but with a prefix she recognized as the local police department. Her brow furrowed in confusion and a ripple of unease, a sensation that had become an unwelcome companion lately, stirred within her. "Eleanor Vance speaking," she said, her voice a little tremulous. "Mrs. Vance, this is Captain Riley from the county sheriff's office," a deep gray voice replied. "I apologize for calling you during your time of mourning, but I need you to come down to the station, immediately, if possible." Eleanor felt a cold dread creep up her spine. "The station? Is something wrong? Has something happened?" She stammered, her mind racing through a dozen terrible possibilities. Captain Riley's tone became even more serious, hushed. "Mrs. Vance, I need to emphasize something very important. Do not tell your son, Arthur, about this call. Not yet. This is strictly for your ears only." The instruction hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. Not tell Arthur? Her eldest son, her anchor in this storm of loss, the one who was supposed to be her protector now. It felt unnatural, even wrong. Yet the captain's voice carried an undeniable authority, an urgency that bypassed her questions and demanded compliance. Eleanor swallowed hard, a knot tightening in her stomach. I understand, Captain. I'll be there as soon as I can." As she hung up, the silence of the house felt different, charged with a new, unsettling energy. It wasn't just grief now. It was a vague, persistent unease that had been nagging at her since Victor's death, a feeling that something significant lurked beneath the surface of their seemingly peaceful family life. It had been manifesting in subtle ways. Arthur's overly solicitous inquiries about her well-being, his frequent comments about the impracticality of maintaining such a large house alone. Serafina, her daughter-in-law, had been even more direct, her voice dripping with artificial concern. Just yesterday, Serafina had sat across from her, a perfectly manicured hand resting on Eleanor's arm. "Mom, you really shouldn't be driving anymore. The car is so large, and you know how bad your eyesight has gotten." Eleanor, who had driven without incident for 60 years, bristled internally. It wasn't about her eyesight. It was about the insidious campaign they had launched to nudge her towards assisted living. Serafina had even gone as far as to mention golden years, the very name sending a shiver of dread down Eleanor's spine. Serafina had spoken of it with a smile, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, painting a picture of carefree days and professional care. But Eleanor saw it as a cage, a place where her independence would be stripped away, where memories would fade into sterile routine. The captain's mysterious call, however, sliced through the fog of her grief and the oppressive weight of her children's concern. It wasn't a distraction. It was a jolt, a sudden, sharp purpose. Victor had always been a man of integrity, deeply private but fiercely protective of his family. If the police were involved, and if Arthur was to be kept out of the loop, then something truly significant was amiss. Eleanor felt a flicker of defiance, a spark of the woman Victor had known and cherished. She would not be relegated to the golden years just yet. She would uncover Victor's secret, whatever it was, and protect what was left of her family. Dressing quickly, her hands surprisingly steady, Eleanor made her way to the station. The building was stark and unwelcoming, a stark contrast to the warmth of her home. Captain Riley, a burly man with kind but weary eyes, met her in a small, windowless office. He offered her coffee, but she declined, her stomach churning with anticipation. "Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice softer now. "Victor came to see me 3 weeks before he passed away. He was worried, deeply worried about your family." Eleanor gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Victor had been worried. He hadn't said a word to her. He had carried this burden alone. The betrayal of her ignorance and the sudden realization of his private fear was a fresh wave of pain. Captain Riley slid a sealed manila envelope across the desk towards her. It was heavy, worn at the edges. Her name, for Eleanor, was scrawled across the front in Victor's familiar hand, followed by a chilling addition: "If something happens to me." Eleanor's fingers trembled as she reached for it, the paper feeling cold against her skin. He had anticipated this. He had prepared for his death. Why? "He said to give this to you directly, and only if he wasn't around," Riley explained, his gaze steady. "He spoke of your youngest son, Marcus, said Marcus was in trouble, big trouble, and that people might come looking for money. The kind you don't want showing up at your front door, Mrs. Vance." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Marcus, her rebellious, often absent son, always chasing some elusive dream, always needing a loan. But big trouble and people looking for money? This wasn't a small gambling debt or a failed business venture. This was serious. In a flash, all the subtle shifts in Arthur and Serafina's behavior snapped into place. Arthur's sudden, intense interest in Victor's will and the family's assets. Serafina's probing questions about their investment portfolio, their hushed conversations that ceased abruptly whenever Eleanor entered the room. It wasn't just about her age or the size of the house, it was about money. Victor's money, Marcus's trouble. "He also asked me to do something else for your safety," Captain Riley continued, his voice lowering again. "I've arranged for extra police patrols around your neighborhood for the next 2 months, just as a precaution, Mrs. Vance." Eleanor stared at him, numb. Victor, anticipating danger, had silently built a shield around her, even from beyond the grave. Her grief morphed into a complex tapestry of gratitude, fear, and a dawning, fierce protectiveness. She was not just mourning a husband, she was now guardian of his secrets, and perhaps the keeper of her family's safety. The unease had been Victor's unspoken warning, a dark premonition he had tried to protect her from. Now the full weight of it pressed down on her, heavier than any sorrow. Her life, she realized with a jolt, had just changed irrevocably. The drive home was a blur of heightened senses and terrifying possibilities. The manila envelope, a silent sentinel on the passenger seat, felt like a lead weight, pressing down not just on the leather, but on Eleanor's very soul. Each passing car seemed to slow down suspiciously. Each shadow stretching across the road appeared menacing. Captain Riley's words echoed in her ears. Marcus was in trouble. Big trouble. People might come looking for money, the kind you don't want showing up at your front door. In the chilling instruction, "Don't tell your son, Arthur." The world, which only an hour ago had been a landscape of familiar grief, had transformed into a shadowy stage where danger lurked just out of sight. As she pulled into the long, winding driveway of the Vance estate, a sleek black sedan, undeniably Arthur's, was already parked. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Too soon. She hadn't had a moment to breathe, to process, to steel herself. As if on cue, the front door swung open, and out stepped Arthur, followed closely by Serafina, both wearing expressions of manufactured concern. They were carrying a glossy brochure and a stack of papers. The Golden Years application forms, she knew with a sickening certainty. "Mom, there you are," Serafina trilled, her voice too bright, too saccharine. She rushed forward, already at Eleanor's car door, pulling it open. "We were just so worried. You disappeared without a word." Her eyes, however, seemed to linger on Eleanor's purse, clutched tight in her hand, as if trying to discern its contents. Eleanor felt a chill, a sudden suspicion that perhaps they hadn't just happened to arrive, but had been tracking her absence. Arthur, usually so composed, looked visibly agitated. He kept his gaze fixed somewhere over Eleanor's shoulder, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a strained smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His inability to meet her gaze was a stark contrast to the Arthur she remembered. The boy who would look her square in the eye and promise to always protect her, a solemn pledge made when he was barely 7 years old. Now that promise felt like ash in her mouth. "Mom, we really need to talk," Serafina insisted, gently but firmly guiding Eleanor towards the house. "We found the most wonderful place for you, Golden Years. It's truly exceptional. They even have a corner room available with a view of the rose garden, just like you love. We've got all the papers ready." Her enthusiasm was almost aggressive, a relentless sales pitch designed to overwhelm any resistance. Eleanor felt a surge of cold fury. They weren't just discussing it, they were presenting her with a fait accompli, boxing her into a decision she had no desire to make. Eleanor merely nodded, feigning a weary compliance she was far from feeling. "I appreciate your concern," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "But I'm quite tired from my outing. I just need a moment alone, if you don't mind." She clutched her purse tighter, the weight of Victor's envelope inside a tangible reminder of the secrets she now carried. She walked past them, head held high, and headed straight for the downstairs powder room, a small, elegant space tucked away from the main living areas. The heavy oak door shut behind her with a satisfying click, sealing her into a sanctuary of privacy. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the manila envelope, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This wasn't just a letter from her late husband. It was a testament, a final urgent message from a man who had known something terrible was unfolding. With bated breath, she tore open the seal. Inside, tucked beneath a neatly folded letter, were photographs. Her breath hitched. The first one showed Arthur, her son, her eldest, seated at a polished conference table, his face pale and drawn, beads of sweat visible on his forehead. Across from him sat two men in dark, impeccably tailored suits, their expressions unreadable, almost predatory. They exuded an aura of cold authority, their eyes like chips of ice. One of them, a lean man with sharp features and a cruel smirk, held a pen, pointing to a document on the table. The next photo captured Arthur, pen in hand, signing the document, his shoulders hunched in defeat. The men watched him, their faces devoid of emotion. Another photo revealed a stack of money, thick wads of cash, being slid across the table, away from Arthur, towards the menacing figures. It was undeniable. This was not a business deal. This was a transaction born of desperation and fear. Her gaze shifted to the letter, Victor's elegant script, a familiar comfort, yet the words themselves were a devastating blow. "Eleanor," it began, "if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. I am so sorry to leave you like this, my love. But I had to protect you. Our son, Arthur, has gotten himself into a terrible mess. He owes these people $87,000. It's not a small gambling debt, Eleanor. These are not men to trifle with. They've threatened all of us, our family, our legacy. I've been trying to handle it, trying to pay them off piece by piece without alarming you or provoking them further. I wanted to resolve it before you ever knew. Now you must be careful." Eleanor felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. 87,000. A staggering amount. Her mind reeled. The threats, the urgency in Victor's voice, even on paper. "Trust no one until you're sure you're safe," the letter continued, its words a direct echo of Captain Riley's earlier warning. "Not even those closest to you right now. I know this is a lot to ask, but you must be strong. I have made arrangements. The key to our safety deposit box is taped securely under the kitchen sink, just behind the disposal. Box number 409 at First National Bank. There are documents there that explain everything and give you the resources you need. Use them wisely, my dearest. I love you always. V." The letter slipped from her numb fingers, fluttering to the tile floor. Trust no one, not even Arthur. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. Arthur and Serafina's incessant push for golden years. their sudden interest in her finances, their carefully constructed facade of concern. It wasn't born of love, but of fear. Fear of these men, fear of the debt, fear that Eleanor, by remaining in the house, would somehow jeopardize them or, worse, uncover their complicity. They wanted her out of the way, safely tucked into a corner room with a rose garden view, while they dealt with Victor's legacy, or perhaps with the mess Arthur had made. Her hands shook as she carefully folded the photographs and the letter, tucking them deep into a hidden zippered compartment within her purse. She washed her face with cold water, taking deep, steadying breaths, forcing her features into a mask of placid sorrow. She could not let them see the earthquake raging inside her. When she emerged, Arthur and Serafina were still waiting, brochures spread out on the dining table. Eleanor offered a tired smile. "I'm still feeling a bit overwhelmed, dears. Let me think about it overnight, won't you? I promise to look at the papers in the morning." They exchanged a quick, frustrated glance, but nodded. Serafina offered to make tea, which Eleanor politely declined, claiming exhaustion. They eventually left, promising to return first thing in the morning. As the sound of Arthur's car faded down the driveway, Eleanor sank onto the nearest chair, her legs suddenly weak. Victor, my brave, meticulous Victor. He hadn't just died of a heart attack. He had died carrying an immense burden, silently protecting his family from a danger that now loomed over her. His meticulous planning, the captain's call, the envelope, the instructions for the safety deposit box key, suggested he had foreseen this, prepared for this very moment long before his heart had finally given out. He had built a fortress of secrets, and now it was up to her to navigate its treacherous passages. The dawn broke with a chilling clarity that mirrored the revelations of the night before. Eleanor, usually a creature of habit, skipped her customary morning tea. Her mind was a whirlwind of anxieties, the words from Victor's letter, and Captain Riley's warning swirling together into a potent cocktail of dread. The silence of the house, once a comfort, now felt heavy with secrets, each creak of the floorboards a potential betrayer. She felt an unsettling sensation, a prickling awareness of being watched, even though she was utterly alone. Every window seemed to hold a pair of unseen eyes, every shadow a lurking threat. After a quick perfunctory breakfast, Eleanor retrieved the key taped under the kitchen sink. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal, a tangible link to Victor's foresight, his desperate attempt to protect her. Clutching her purse, heavy with the key and the hidden photographs, she slipped out of the house before Arthur and Serafina could arrive with their saccharine smiles and their golden years brochures. The drive to First National Bank was tense. She kept glancing in her rearview mirror, convinced a black sedan was following her, or perhaps the menacing figures from the photographs. Her heart hammered with a rhythm that was equal parts fear and determination. She was no longer just a grieving widow. She was an investigator, piecing together a dangerous puzzle. At the bank, the familiar scent of polished wood and old money offered little comfort. Eleanor approached the counter, her voice steady as she requested access to safety deposit box number 409. Mrs. Lee, the bank manager, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, recognized Eleanor immediately. "Mrs. Vance, it's good to see you, though I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Mrs. Lee," Eleanor replied, offering a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I need to access Victor's safety deposit box." "Of course," Mrs. Lee said, her expression softening. "He updated it just last month, you know. Added your name to the access list. A very wise decision, given everything." Eleanor's blood ran cold. A month ago. That coincided precisely with Arthur and Serafina's sudden, intense financial inquiries. Their veiled questions about Victor's investments in the house's equity. Victor had known. He had sensed the encroaching danger, the shifting sands beneath their family's feet, and he had prepared. The thought sent a fresh wave of both grief and admiration through her. Within minutes, Eleanor was led to a small, private viewing room. Mrs. Lee inserted the two keys, the one from under the sink and the bank's master key, and with a soft click, the heavy metal door swung open. Inside, a rectangular metal box gleamed under the soft light. Eleanor thanked Mrs. Lee, who discreetly withdrew, closing the door behind her. Eleanor sat down, her hands trembling as she pulled out the box. The contents were neatly organized, each packet secured with a rubber band, each label in Victor's precise hand. The first folder held legal documents, copies of their house deed, various investment certificates, and detailed records of their retirement funds. But beneath those, the true horror began to unfold. There were copies of loan applications bearing Arthur's signature, borrowing against the equity of their very home. Then, bank statements for accounts Eleanor had no knowledge of, all opened in her name, with small, sporadic deposits and large, frequent withdrawals. They weren't just exploiting her, they were compromising her. Next, a series of threatening letters, printed on plain white paper, devoid of any official letterhead, but chilling in their directness. The earliest ones detailed Arthur's debt, precisely $87,405. The language escalated from general warnings about overdue payments to specific, veiled threats against the family. They spoke of consequences, of making an example, of collecting what is owed one way or another. Her eyes fell on the latest letter, dated just 2 days after Victor's funeral. The words seemed to jump off the page, cold and malevolent. Your husband's death changes nothing. The debt remains. Your son will contact us within 48 hours, or we will contact you personally. The implication was clear. The vultures were circling, and Victor's death had merely changed their target. Eleanor was now in their crosshairs. Then came the gambling records. Stacks of printed statements from multiple online casinos, detailing massive, dizzying losses. Arthur's name was plastered across them, a testament to a destructive addiction that had been secretly devouring their family's future. Victor must have compiled these, patiently, meticulously, gathering proof of his son's reckless descent. But the most horrifying discovery was yet to come. Tucked at the very bottom, in a separate, thin envelope, was a document that made Eleanor's blood run cold, freezing her in her seat. It was a life insurance policy, a substantial one for $200,000, making out on her. 3 months ago, with Arthur Vance listed as the sole beneficiary, the world tilted. The air left her lungs in a whoosh. A life insurance policy on her, taken out by Arthur only 3 months ago. Victor had only recently passed. The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. This wasn't just about debt, it was about her life. Arthur hadn't been pushing her into golden years out of concern or even just greed. He was setting the stage. He saw her as an obstacle, a means to an end. He wanted her gone one way or another, and the golden years was merely the gentler, slower path to that $200,000 payout. The threats from the mysterious men, the debt, the insurance policy, it all pointed to one chilling conclusion. Her own son was a danger to her. Eleanor stared at the policy, her heart thudding painfully. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it stole her breath. Her son, her own flesh and blood, was plotting against her. She wasn't just grieving a husband, she was fighting for her life. She carefully put all the documents back into the box, her movements precise, almost robotic. She knew what she had to do. This was her and Victor's money, their retirement savings, their safety net. Now it was her only defense. She exited the viewing room, her face carefully composed. Mrs. Lee was waiting at the counter. "Everything all right, Mrs. Vance?" she asked kindly. "Yes, thank you, Mrs. Lee," Eleanor replied, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "I need to make a substantial withdrawal from my savings account. All of it, in fact, in cashier's checks." Mrs. Lee blinked, surprised. "All of it? Mrs. Vance, are you sure? It's a rather large sum. Perhaps we should discuss this with Arthur first. For his input, you know." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Lee," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "This is my account. It is my money. I want every penny of it. Today." Her gaze met Mrs. Lee's, a silent challenge in her eyes. The bank manager, sensing the steel beneath Eleanor's polite facade, simply nodded. An hour later, Eleanor walked out of the bank with $38,600 in cashier's checks tucked securely in her purse. It was a substantial portion of her life savings, their meticulously accumulated retirement fund. It felt light, yet heavy with the weight of her future. This wasn't just money, it was freedom, power, and her only weapon in a war she hadn't known she was fighting. She still felt watched, but now she also felt armed. The moment Eleanor stepped back into the Vance house, a cold knot tightened in her stomach. It wasn't anything obvious, no overturned furniture or forced entry. It was subtler than that. A faint, almost imperceptible shift in the air, a scent that wasn't quite right. The cushion on Victor's armchair was slightly askew. A delicate ceramic figurine on the mantelpiece was turned a fraction of an inch to the left, not its usual spot. Her meticulous mind, honed by decades of maintaining a perfect home, registered these minute discrepancies instantly. Her paranoia, which had been simmering beneath the surface, solidified into a terrifying certainty. Her house had been searched. They had been here. Her children. Or perhaps the ominous they Victor had warned her about. Before she could even fully process this violation, the insistent chime of the doorbell cut through the heavy silence. Eleanor froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She crept to the parlor window, peeking through the lace curtains. Standing on her front porch, a faint predatory smile playing on his lips, was a man in an expensive, impeccably tailored dark suit. His sharp features and icy eyes were unmistakable. He was one of the men from Victor's photographs, the same man pointing the pen at Arthur. Victor Rossi. Eleanor's breath hitched. They were here. Already. The 48-hour deadline from the letter was ticking. She pressed herself against the wall, willing herself to be invisible, her mind racing. She heard the faint rustle of paper as he slid something into the frame of the door. Then the rhythmic crunch of gravel as he walked back to a sleek black car, its windows tinted opaque, and drove away. With trembling hands, Eleanor retrieved the item he'd left. It was a business card, thick and glossy, engraved with elegant script. Victor Rossi, Financial Consulting. We specialize in resolving family obligations. The last phrase sent a fresh shiver of dread through her. Family obligations. A euphemism for blackmail and debt collection. A polite veneer over something far more sinister. Just as she was absorbing this latest shock, her phone buzzed, vibrating violently in her hand. It was Arthur. "Mom, where are you? I've been calling." His voice was tight, strained, laced with an anxiety that bordered on accusation. "I just saw a car leaving your house, a black sedan. Did anyone come to the door? Did you talk to anyone?" Eleanor feigned a slight confusion. "Oh, Arthur, I just got back from the bank. I was just about to call you. What are you talking about, dear?" Her voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Listen, Mom, don't talk to anyone without me. Anyone at all, understand? I'm on my way over. Don't open the door until I get there." The urgency in his voice was palpable, a desperate edge that sent a wave of revulsion through Eleanor. "Too late for that, son," she thought, clutching the business card tighter. As soon as she hung up, she dialed Captain Riley. Her voice, though still tinged with fear, held a new resolve as she recounted the day's terrifying events. The feeling of intrusion, Rossi's visit, the chilling message on his business card, and then the full, devastating extent of Arthur's betrayal, including the life insurance policy. "Captain," she finished, her voice raw, "my own son took out a policy on my life. He wants me dead." Captain Riley listened in grim silence. "Mrs. Vance, this confirms our worst suspicions. Do not, under any circumstances, let Arthur in when he arrives. Tell him you are not feeling well, that you need to rest. Do not engage him." "But he's my son," Eleanor whispered, a flicker of the old love, the old loyalty battling with the new, chilling reality. "Trust once broken doesn't heal just because you want it to, Mrs. Vance," Riley said gently but firmly. "Right now, your priority is your safety and Victor's." "Victor's?" Eleanor repeated, confused. "What about Victor? Given how meticulous your husband was, Mrs. Vance, how carefully he prepared everything for you, a safety deposit box, a coded message, even police patrols. It stands to reason he might have had a backup plan. Somewhere else. For you, if things escalated beyond the bank's reach. Think, Mrs. Vance, is there anywhere he kept secrets? Somewhere Arthur and Serafina wouldn't think to look?" A sudden sharp memory pierced through Eleanor's fear-addled mind. Victor's workshop in the garage. His sanctuary. A place Arthur and Serafina had always avoided, deeming it dusty, greasy, and beneath their sophisticated tastes. Victor spent countless hours there. tinkering, building, lost in his own world of intricate mechanics and woodworking. He had always said, "A man needs a place where he can think, Eleanor, where he can truly be himself." With renewed purpose, Eleanor hurried through the back door and across the small, paved courtyard to the detached three-car garage. The air inside was thick with the familiar sense of sawdust, oil, and old leather. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, blueprints lay rolled on a workbench, and various half-finished projects sat patiently awaiting Victor's touch. It was a testament to his careful, organized mind. She walked straight to a massive industrial-grade metal tool cabinet that stood against the far wall. Victor had always kept it locked, claiming it contained sensitive instruments. It was heavy, almost like a vault. She ran her hands along the cool, rough metal, searching. Behind it, almost perfectly camouflaged against the cinder block wall, she found it. Another small, wax-sealed envelope, tucked into a narrow gap, held in place by a strip of heavy-duty tape. Her heart hammered with a desperate hope. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside were two items, a single, unfamiliar key and a small, folded piece of paper. Victor's familiar handwriting again, strong and clear. "If they come for you, go here. This is our true safe haven. You'll understand everything when you get there. Do not tell anyone. I love you, my brave Eleanor." Beneath the note was an address meticulously printed. Not far, just on the outskirts of town, in a quiet, unassuming neighborhood she rarely visited. A new spark of determination ignited within her. Victor hadn't just prepared for her safety, he had prepared for her escape. Just then, she heard the unmistakable sound of Arthur's car pulling into the driveway, the crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of a car door. He was here. Eleanor quickly tucked the envelope and key into her purse, alongside the cashier's checks. She took a deep breath, composed her features, and stepped out of the garage, locking the door behind her. The game had begun. She would face her son, armed with knowledge, pretending ignorance, and holding a secret that could save her life. The heavy oak door swung open, revealing Arthur. He wasn't the polished, self-assured son Eleanor knew. He was a desperate, disheveled man, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair falling into his eyes, which were red-rimmed and swollen. He looked like a scared little man, reminiscent of the time she had nurtured him through childhood fevers, his small hand clutched in hers. The sight tugged at a forgotten corner of her heart, a maternal instinct that warred fiercely with the icy dread currently gripping her. "Mom," he croaked, his voice raw. "You saw him, didn't you? Rossi." Eleanor simply nodded, her gaze unwavering. She stepped back, allowing him entry, but the maternal warmth she usually offered was conspicuously absent. "Where's Serafina?" she asked, her voice calm, almost unnervingly so. The thought of her daughter-in-law with her poisoned honey voice and predatory smiles made her skin crawl. Arthur waved a dismissive hand. She's dealing with something. Mom, I'm in trouble. Bad trouble. You know about the debt, don't you? Dad told you." He wrung his hands, pacing the pristine Persian rug of the foyer. Eleanor merely watched him, a silent sentinel, allowing him to unravel his own confession. "How much trouble, Arthur?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. He stopped, his eyes finally meeting hers, brimming with tears. $87,412, Mom. It's from gambling. It got out of control. I tried to stop, I really did, but..." He trailed off, burying his face in his hands. The exact figure, the one from Victor's letter, confirmed every horrifying detail. "Your father found out, didn't he?" Eleanor prompted, her voice barely a whisper. Arthur nodded, his shoulders shaking. "About 6 weeks ago, he saw some unusual charges on his credit report, things he couldn't explain. He looked at me, Mom, and he could see right through me. I couldn't lie to him. He was furious, not just about the money, but because I had put you in danger." Eleanor felt a cold dread spread through her veins. "Danger? What kind of danger?" "These people, Mom, they don't play around," Arthur choked out, rubbing his temples. "They're ruthless. They told me that if I didn't pay, they'd come after families. They said accidents happen to old people all the time. They even mentioned heart attacks. I thought they were just trying to scare me into paying faster. I never thought they'd I never thought they'd actually hurt Dad. The words hung in the air, a poisonous miasma. Eleanor's breath hitched. Victor's sudden, unexpected heart attack. The doctors had called it natural causes, a massive coronary, but Victor didn't have a heart condition. He was healthy, vibrant, always active. The horrifying implication crashed down on her like a tidal wave. "Your father didn't have a heart condition, Arthur," Eleanor said. Her voice so low it was almost a growl. Her hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, clenched into tight fists. "He was perfectly healthy. Are you telling me that these people, that you brought killers to our door? You got your father murdered over gambling debts?" Arthur recoiled as if struck, his face contorting in anguish. "No, Mom, no, I swear I never wanted that. I thought they were just trying to scare me. I never believed they'd actually. I loved Dad." He collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably, his cries echoing in the grand, silent foyer. But Eleanor felt no pity, no warmth, no maternal instinct to comfort him, only a cold, calculating fury. Her husband, her love, gone because of this weak, pathetic man she called her son. He hadn't just brought trouble to their door, he had invited death. "He died because of you, Arthur," she stated, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Now, what is Serafina's brilliant plan to cover your tracks? Another life insurance policy, perhaps?" The words, sharp and laced with bitter irony, hung heavy in the air. Arthur flinched, then lifted his tear-streaked face. "No, Mom, not like that. Serafina, she found out about the debt after Dad died. She was terrified. She said we had to move you out, sell the house, pay them off with the money from Dad's life insurance. She said they wouldn't stop until they got paid, and with the house gone and you safe in golden years, they wouldn't have a target." He looked at her with pleading eyes. "It's for your own safety, Mom. You'll be safe there and we can pay them off, and this will all be over." Eleanor stood, her posture rigid, her face a mask of stone. "So you want me to sign myself into a prison sentence disguised as elder care so you can sell my home and use your father's life insurance, money meant for my future, to cover your gambling debts? Is that about right, Arthur?" The front door suddenly burst open, and Serafina swept in, her eyes wide with a practiced alarm. She was impeccably dressed, her perfect facade unwavering. "Eleanor, oh, thank goodness you're here." "Arthur, what's wrong? Mom, have you signed the papers? We need to do this now. Every day you delay is another day something terrible could happen." "Arthur told me everything, dearest. It's for your own good, for all of us." She clutched a fresh set of Golden Years brochures, her gaze darting from Eleanor to Arthur, a silent command passing between them. The full picture clicked into place with horrifying clarity. They weren't just afraid, they were manipulating. They wanted her out of the way, a complication to be eliminated so they could resolve Arthur's problem and perhaps even profit from it. Her own son and daughter-in-law were trying to orchestrate her removal, potentially even her death, all to save themselves from the consequences of Arthur's destructive addiction. The revelation was a gut punch. "I think you should both leave now," Eleanor said, her voice low and steady, though a tempest raged within her. Serafina's perfect smile faltered. "Eleanor, you don't understand the gravity of this situation. Those people Arthur owes money to, they're not patient people. They know exactly how much this house is worth. They know everything." She glanced meaningfully around the opulent foyer, her eyes glinting with a veiled threat. Eleanor stared at them, two strangers consumed by fear and greed. Victor's warning, "Trust no one," echoed in her mind. His address, the one she now carried, wasn't just a backup plan, it was an escape route. An escape route not just from the mysterious men, but from her own flesh and blood. She had to get out, and she had to do it before they could trap her further. The sight of Arthur and Serafina, their faces a twisted mosaic of fear and greed, had been the final straw. With their chilling departure still echoing in the grand foyer, Eleanor knew she couldn't stay. She couldn't fight them in a house that felt tainted by their betrayal, a house where her husband had been murdered. Clutching her purse, heavy with her life savings and Victor's desperate escape plan, she grabbed her car keys and fled. The Vance estate, once her haven, now felt like a gilded cage. She drove, numbly at first, following the precise directions Victor had left. The route led her away from the familiar, manicured streets of their affluent neighborhood, through the bustling town center, and then onto winding country roads fringed with dense forest. The scenery grew increasingly rural, the houses sparser, until she was truly on the outskirts of civilization. Finally, she spotted it, a narrow, unpaved lane disappearing into a thick copse of trees. The address matched. Hesitantly, Eleanor turned down the lane, the branches scraping against the sides of her car. The lane opened into a small clearing, dominated by a rustic, unassuming cabin. It was small, built of dark timber, with a welcoming porch and a stone chimney. Not grand, not luxurious, but it radiated an immediate sense of peace and solitude. It looked like a place to hide, a refuge. She parked the car, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Getting out, she approached the cabin, the key in her trembling hand. It was an old-fashioned skeleton key, solid and worn smooth by time. It slid into the lock, a perfect fit, and with a soft click, the door swung inward. The interior was sparse but functional, surprisingly cozy. A small living area with a stone fireplace, a compact kitchen, and a single bedroom visible through an open doorway. The air was fresh, and a faint scent of pine lingered. It was clear the cabin had been recently used. A stack of neatly folded blankets lay on the sofa, and a single half-empty coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter. Victor had been here. He had prepared this. On the small wooden kitchen table, another envelope lay waiting. This one, too, was sealed with wax, bearing Victor's distinctive V insignia. Her fingers shook as she tore it open. "Eleanor," the letter began, Victor's familiar script a lifeline in the churning seas of her confusion. "If you are reading this, then my plan worked. You found the cabin, you are safe. I know you've been through hell, my love, and I am so deeply sorry for the pain I've caused you, but there was no other way. I realized, after I discovered the full extent of Arthur's debt and the nature of the people he owed, that they were planning to kill us both. Not just me, for the insurance, but you too, to silence any loose ends or to prevent you from interfering. They were waiting for an opportunity, a heart attack, just as Arthur confessed." Eleanor gasped, a cold shiver running down her spine. Victor had known. He had known their lives were forfeit. Suddenly, a sound from the bedroom, a faint shuffle of footsteps, made Eleanor freeze. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a drumbeat of pure terror. Was it Rossi? Had they found her already? She stood rigid, barely breathing, her eyes fixed on the open bedroom door. Then a figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and kind, weary eyes. He was wearing simple clothes, a plain shirt and trousers, but his face, oh, his face, it was impossible. It couldn't be. "Victor?" she whispered, the name a choked sound, barely audible. He looked exactly as he had always looked. A little older, perhaps, a little more worn, but undeniably him. Her dead husband stood before her, alive and unreal, his eyes filled with an unspeakable relief and sorrow. Eleanor felt a wave of dizziness. She swayed, clutching the table for support. It was a hallucination, a trick of her grief-addled mind. He was gone. She had buried him. She had wept over his casket. He took a step towards her, then another, his gaze fixed on hers. "It's really me, Eleanor," he said, his voice husky, filled with emotion. He knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his. His touch was warm, real. "I'm so sorry, my love. I am so terribly, terribly sorry I had to put you through that. But it was the only way." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, a mixture of shock, confusion, and an overwhelming, impossible joy. "But the funeral? The casket? I saw you, Victor. I saw you lowered into the ground." He squeezed her hands. "I know, my darling. I was there. I watched it from afar. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Seeing you grieve, seeing our son, it broke my heart, but I couldn't risk being seen, not then." Eleanor stared at him, trying to reconcile the impossible. How? How is this possible? The doctors, the death certificate? Victor sighed, his gaze distant for a moment. Dr. Sanchez. You remember him, the pediatrician who saved Marcus when he was a baby? That rare blood disorder? He owed me a big favor. A very big favor. Dr. Sanchez? Eleanor repeated, a flicker of understanding. Dr. Sanchez, a brilliant, unconventional man, a man Victor had helped financially years ago when his son faced a medical crisis. He falsified the death certificate, Victor confirmed, his voice grim. We found a John Doe at the morgue, a man with similar build, similar age. He swapped the bodies. It was risky, incredibly so, but Sanchez agreed. He believed these men, these financial consultants, were truly dangerous. And the heart attack? Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. How did you fake that? Victor gave a wry, humorless smile. A potent cocktail of drugs. Sanchez specializes in cardiac pharmacology. He knew exactly what to administer, in what dosage, to slow my heart rate to an almost undetectable level for several hours. I appeared clinically dead. It's a dangerous procedure, Eleanor. You could have died for real, he warned me. You could have died for real, Eleanor cried, a fresh wave of tears. Victor, what were you thinking? He pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her close, stroking her hair. I was thinking, he murmured against her temple, that if I hadn't done it, we both would have died for real. This was the only way to make them believe I was gone, to remove their primary target and give us a chance to escape. I knew Arthur would scramble for the insurance money to pay them, and that you would become their next target. I had to create a path for you, my love, a path to safety, away from them, and tragically, away from Arthur. Eleanor clung to him, the reality of his presence overwhelming. Her grief had been a carefully orchestrated illusion, a necessary deception. Victor, the man she loved, was alive, but his resurrection unveiled an even deeper, more terrifying truth. Their world had shattered, and they were now fugitives from their own family. Eleanor clung to Victor, the scent of him, the feel of his arms around her, a tangible anchor in the storm of impossible revelations. When the initial shock and overwhelming relief began to recede, 100 questions rushed into her mind, each more urgent than the last. She pulled back slightly, looking into his weary eyes. How long, Victor? How long have you been planning this elaborate deception? How long have you been dead? Victor sighed, his gaze distant. Since the day Rossi's men came to our house, Eleanor. They didn't just come for Arthur's debt. They laid out the whole plan, your life insurance policy, the sale of our home. All of it was part of their scheme to cover Arthur's gambling losses. And then, for you to have a convenient accident after your move to Golden Years. I overheard them hiding in my study. They didn't think I was listening. Eleanor shivered, the cold dread returning. But Arthur, he told me about the threats, the accidents. He seemed so distraught. And Serafina, she was so convincing, pushing for the assisted living. Victor's face hardened, a grim mask of pain and resolve. That's where the true rot lies, my love. Serafina, she didn't just find out about Arthur's debt. She encouraged it, facilitated it, made sure he owed more than he could ever repay. Eleanor stared at him, bewildered. What are you talking about, Serafina? She's Arthur's wife. She seemed to love him. Victor shook his head, a bitter expression on his face. Love was never part of Serafina's game. She's not who she says she is, Eleanor, not entirely. He paused, letting the words sink in, then delivered the bombshell that shattered Eleanor's world even further. Serafina isn't just Arthur's wife. She's Victor Rossi's niece. Eleanor reeled back, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. No, that's impossible. Arthur and Serafina have been together for 2 years. They courted, they were engaged, they married. How could she be Rossi's niece? She's Serafina Vance. Her real name is Serafina Romano, Victor corrected, his voice grave. The courtship, the engagement, the wedding, it was all a calculated setup, Eleanor. Arthur was a mark, a pawn in their scheme from the very beginning. His gambling problem made him the perfect target. A wealthy family, an aging parent with assets. It's a pattern, a gruesome business model these people have perfected. He walked over to the small, hidden compartment in the wall, pulling out a thick, unmarked folder. Inside, Eleanor saw more photographs, not just of Arthur and Rossi, but of Serafina. Pictures of her with Rossi, laughing, embracing, in various illicit settings. There were also documents, birth certificates, passports, financial records, all revealing Serafina Romano's true identity. The woman who had infiltrated their family, wormed her way into their lives, was a professional predator. She's been running these marriage scams for at least 15 years, Victor explained, his voice devoid of emotion as he presented the damning evidence. Targeting men with gambling problems and elderly parents. She lures them in, encourages their addiction, gets them into insurmountable debt with her uncle's financial consulting firm, and then, when the time is right, orchestrates the disappearance of the elderly parent. Usually it's a natural death, a heart attack or a stroke or a fall that goes unnoticed in a care home. Eleanor's blood ran cold. An accident? She whispered, remembering the life insurance policy on her. Not always an accident, Victor clarified, his voice chilling. In one case, a woman, the mother of Serafina's previous husband, died of an apparent overdose of her heart medication. It was ruled accidental. Serafina collected a substantial inheritance from that family too. She is a killer, Eleanor. Arthur doesn't know, does he? Eleanor asked, a flicker of pity for her son piercing through her rage. Victor shook his head. No, he genuinely believes he fell in love. He's a fool, Eleanor, but he's not a murderer. He's a victim of her manipulation, just like you and I were meant to be. But how did you find all this out? Eleanor asked, reeling from the barrage of information. For the past 2 months, ever since I discovered the full extent of Arthur's debt and the source of his creditors, I've been working with federal investigators, Victor revealed, his gaze resolute. Captain Riley introduced me to them. They've been trying to bring down Rossi's organization for years. They have enough evidence for the gambling, the extortion, but what they need, what is crucial, is a recording of his niece admitting to the insurance fraud, admitting to the pattern, admitting to planning another murder. Eleanor's eyes widened in dawning horror. You want to use me as bait, don't you? Victor took her hands again, his grip firm. Eleanor, I wouldn't ask this if there was any other way. But you are the key. You are the final piece of their puzzle. They believe you are a complication they need to remove. But we can turn that into our advantage. You have a choice, my love. We can disappear. Vanish with new identities and live out our lives in peace away from all of this. Or we can use this opportunity. We can put these monsters behind bars, save Arthur from a life of slavery to them, and prevent more innocent families from being destroyed. 7 other elderly couples died in suspicious accidents after their children incurred gambling debts with Rossi's group. 7, Eleanor, we can stop them. Eleanor looked at the surveillance photos, at Serafina's cold, calculating smile. She thought of Victor, risking his life, faking his own death, all to protect her and expose this monstrous scheme. She thought of Arthur, a pathetic pawn, but still her son. She thought of the 7 other elderly couples, unsuspecting victims in Serafina's cruel game. The fire that had been smoldering within her ignited into a fierce, unyielding blaze. How do we do it? She asked, her voice strong, unwavering. Victor's eyes, though weary, held a spark of hope. We let them think they've won. We let them think they have you cornered. Serafina will come here tonight, Eleanor. She'll come to finish what she started. She'll try to get you to sign the papers, or she'll try something else. We will be ready. We will record every word. This means our old life is over, Eleanor stated, not as a question, but as a realization. Victor nodded grimly. It will be. There's no going back from this. Eleanor met his gaze, her jaw set. Good, she said, her voice filled with a newfound steel, because I don't want to be a victim anymore. The living room felt charged with an almost unbearable tension as the evening shadows lengthened. Eleanor sat on the sofa, outwardly calm, a delicate teacup held steady in her hands, but her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Tucked deep within her purse, sitting discreetly beside her, was a tiny, state-of-the-art FBI recording device. Victor was in the garage, a silent guardian, monitoring the situation, ready to act on a prearranged signal. The plan was set, but Eleanor was still plagued by a gnawing fear and uncertainty that trembled beneath her composure. The doorbell rang, not with the familiar chimes, but a frantic, insistent peal. It wasn't Serafina's elegant, practiced knock. Eleanor opened the door to find Arthur looking utterly haggard, his face pale and etched with despair. He had clearly not slept, his expensive clothes crumpled, his eyes wide and panicked. He was early. Serafina was supposed to be first. This was not part of the plan. "Mom," Arthur whispered, stumbling into the foyer. I have to tell you something. I can't let her do this." His voice was hoarse, choked with emotion. He seemed to shrink before her eyes, a shadow of the arrogant man he had become. Eleanor's heart ached for him, despite everything. "What is it, Arthur?" she asked gently, guiding him to a chair, her hand resting briefly on his arm. He buried his face in his hands. "Serafina, Jennifer isn't who you think she is. She's connected to the people I owe money to. She's Victor Rossi's niece." The words tumbled out, a torrent of shame and fear. Eleanor maintained her poker face, though a wave of surprise washed over her. Arthur knew. He had found out. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice calm. "I overheard a phone call 3 nights ago," he confessed, tears streaming down his face. "She thought I was asleep. She was talking to Rossi, bragging about how perfectly everything was going, how easily she had me wrapped around her finger, about the life insurance policy on you. She laughed, Mom. She laughed about Dad's heart attack. I recorded it. I'm recording everything too." He pulled out his phone, a small red light blinking on the side. Eleanor's mind raced. This changed everything. It complicated the FBI's meticulous plan, but it also offered a glimmer of hope for Arthur. She wanted to tell him, to relieve him of this immense burden, to tell him that Victor was alive, that they could fix this. But before she could speak, the distinct sound of a key turning in the lock echoed through the house. Serafina was here. She swept in, a sleek, predatory figure in a sharp business suit, a pristine leather briefcase clutched in her hand. Her eyes, usually so calculating, held a flicker of impatience as she took in Arthur's tear-streaked face. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" Her gaze then fixed on Eleanor. "Eleanor, good. I see you're still with us. Have you had time to consider the golden years papers? We need to finalize this tonight. The deadline is midnight." Her voice was smooth but laced with an undeniable steel. Arthur, emboldened by his confession and perhaps the hope of redemption, tried to interject. "Serafina, wait. We need to talk. Mom, she—" Serafina cut him off with a look that would curdle milk. Her mask was slipping, the thinly veiled sweetness giving way to cold, hard intent. "Arthur, darling, not now. This is a very sensitive discussion with Eleanor." Eleanor, seizing the moment, decided to push. "Sensitive discussion about my future? Or sensitive discussion about my death? Accidents like the one that killed my husband?" Serafina's perfect smile vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped sneer. "Eleanor, darling, you're being paranoid. Your husband died of natural causes. People who care about me don't take out life insurance policies without my knowledge," Eleanor countered, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "Especially not on their mothers-in-law, with their husband as the sole beneficiary." The facade shattered completely. Serafina's eyes blazed with a cold fury. "You think you are clever, old woman? You think you know anything? That debt is real, and it needs to be paid. Your family, Victor Rossi, is my uncle, and this whole marriage to your spineless son has been about collecting that debt." Her voice was venomous, dripping with contempt. "We knew about Victor's fake death, you fool. We knew about the cabin. Let's just say your husband's second death was much more convincing than his first." Eleanor's blood ran cold. She struggled to keep her composure, remembering the plan, remembering Victor in the garage. But the words, Victor's second death, struck a chord of terror. Serafina smirked, enjoying Eleanor's terror. She pulled a glossy photo from her briefcase, tossing it onto the coffee table. It was a picture of Victor lying on the floor of the cabin, eyes open and vacant, a dark stain spreading beneath his head. Lifeless. Arthur stumbled back, a guttural cry escaping him, and then vomited violently onto the expensive rug. "He tried to be clever," Serafina hissed, her voice triumphant. "Working with federal agents. Oh, Eleanor, you naive old woman. Those federal agents he thought he was working with, they work for us. They have been feeding us information all along. And now your husband is truly dead. Permanently. Now sign the papers. Move into golden years. Or your death will be very, very slow and very, very painful." She pushed the papers and a pen across the table. Eleanor stared at the photo of Victor, her mind numb with shock and horror. Was it true? Had he really been found? Betrayed by his own supposed allies? Had his heroic sacrifice been for nothing? Her hand reached for the pen, trembling. "Hello, Serafina." The voice, calm and utterly familiar, came from the kitchen doorway. Serafina froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. Eleanor's head snapped up. Victor stood there, very much alive, a grim expression on his face. Beside him, two figures in FBI vests, weapons drawn, stood poised. "You're dead," Serafina whispered, her face a mask of utter shock, all bravado gone. Victor offered a grim smile. "That's what we wanted you to think." A woman, Agent Kim, stepped forward, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Serafina Romano, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, racketeering, and extortion. You have the right to remain silent." As she read the Miranda rights, another agent moved to cuff Serafina. "The recording!" Serafina shrieked, struggling against the cuffs. "You needed the recording. I didn't say anything." Victor stepped forward, looking down at his niece with profound disappointment. "We didn't need a recording from you tonight, Serafina. We had your confession to a room full of federal agents. Every word you just spoke, every threat, every detail of your scheme was broadcast directly to the team waiting in the vans outside. And the picture of me dead in the cabin, staged by the FBI this morning. We knew you'd bring it as proof." Agent Kim added, her voice chillingly calm, "Your uncle, Victor Rossi, and 12 other members of his organization were arrested 2 hours ago. It's very much over, Serafina." The room fell silent, save for Serafina's furious, defeated curses. Arthur, still green from sickness, stared at Victor, unable to reconcile the impossible. Eleanor, however, felt a wave of profound relief wash over her, followed by a surge of fierce, triumphant joy. They had won. The echoing silence that followed Serafina's arrest was profound, heavy with the weight of revelation and the wreckage of what had once been their family. Eleanor, Victor, and Arthur were left alone in the grand living room, the scene of so much deception. Arthur, pale and shaking, stared at his father as if he were a ghost. Tears welled in his eyes, not of fear now, but of raw, devastating shame. "Dad? Mom?" he choked out, his voice barely a whisper. I'm so sorry for all of it. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know." Victor, still recovering from the elaborate charade of his death, simply watched his son, his expression unreadable. He then turned to Eleanor, his hand gently touching her arm. "Are you okay, my love?" Eleanor took a deep, shaky breath, the tension of the past weeks finally beginning to release its grip. "I will be," she replied. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she truly believed it. The impossible had happened. Victor was alive, and the nightmare was finally over. 6 months later, the Vance estate, with its painful memories and haunted grandeur, was a distant echo. Eleanor and Victor had found a new rhythm in a smaller, sun-drenched home in Tucson, Arizona. It was a comfortable, unassuming house filled with new furniture and the promise of quiet, peaceful days. They embraced their new routines, the simple joy of morning coffee together, long walks in the desert warmth, and evenings spent reading in companionable silence. Life was simpler, lighter, free from the dark shadow that had nearly consumed them. A letter from Agent Kim arrived a few weeks into their new life, neatly summarizing the legal fallout. Serafina Romano had received a sentence of 25 years in a federal penitentiary for her part in the racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Victor Rossi, her uncle, the architect of the entire criminal enterprise, was sentenced to life without parole. The other 12 members of his organization received sentences ranging from 10 to 30 years. Justice, swift and severe, had been served. The letter also contained news of Arthur. He had testified extensively against Rossi's organization. His detailed account of Serafina's manipulation and his own descent into gambling proving invaluable to the prosecution. In exchange for his cooperation, he had been granted immunity. He was now working at a hardware store in Denver, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings religiously and seeing a therapist. He had truly hit rock bottom and was slowly, painfully rebuilding his life. One quiet Tuesday evening, the phone rang. It was Arthur. His voice, when Eleanor answered, was hesitant, humble. "Mom, Dad, I was wondering if I could come see you both for Christmas. I want to apologize properly. In person." Eleanor listened, a myriad of emotions swirling within her. The old Eleanor, the one who lived in the grand estate, who believed in unconditional family love, would have said yes immediately, embracing him without question. But the new Eleanor, forged in the crucible of betrayal and survival, knew better. Forgiveness, she now understood, was earned, not simply given. She looked at Victor, who sat across from her, reading a newspaper. He met her gaze, a silent question in his eyes. "He wants to come for Christmas," she mouthed. Victor simply nodded, leaving the decision to her. "Arthur," Eleanor said into the phone, her voice steady, "we'll think about it. We'll call you back." She hung up, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I think he's still our son, Victor," she said, turning to him. "He's still family. But I also think we need to see who he's become before we decide what that means for us, if anything." 3 days later, they called Arthur back, suggesting a meeting at a neutral location, a small cafe in Phoenix, a city equidistant enough to feel like a deliberate effort on his part. When he arrived, he looked older than his years, thinner, and undeniably humbler. But his eyes, though still holding traces of pain, were clearer, more open than Eleanor had seen in a long time. He sat across from them, hands clasped on the table, and spoke from the heart. He recounted his shame, his self-disgust, his complete ignorance of Serafina's true nature until the bitter end. "What I did, allowing myself to be led down that path, putting you both in danger, it's unforgivable," he said, his voice raw. "Serafina, she didn't just encourage the gambling, she fed my delusion. She made me believe I was winning, just a few more bets away from a big score. She cultivated the debt." Victor, calm and collected, asked the question that had plagued them. "Why would she encourage you to lose, Arthur? If it was about collecting a debt, why not let you win just enough to pay some of it back?" Arthur looked down, his voice heavy. "She said it was to create more pressure, to force creative solutions, like the life insurance on Mom, like selling the house. The deeper the hole, the more desperate I'd be to agree to anything." He outlined his recovery plan, his voice earnest. "I'm going to keep working at the hardware store, keep going to meetings, keep seeing the therapist. I'm going to try to become the kind of man you and Dad could be proud of again." Eleanor felt a stirring of hope, cautious but real. "Pride has to be earned, Arthur," she said softly, "just like trust." Victor nodded in agreement. Arthur looked at them, a desperate plea in his eyes. Can I call once a month, just to check in?" Eleanor considered it, then nodded. "We'll see how it goes, Arthur." The drive back to Tucson was quiet. Eleanor leaned her head against Victor's shoulder. "He's changed," she murmured. "He really seemed to mean it." Victor squeezed her hand. "He has a long road ahead. Whether he can actually walk it remains to be seen." That evening, as they sat on their patio watching the desert sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, Victor turned to Eleanor. "Do you have any regrets, my love, about any of it?" Eleanor took a moment, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. "No," she finally said, her voice clear and strong. "I regret that it took us so long to see what was happening, that we were so blind to the darkness beneath our own roof. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret trusting you, even when it seemed impossible." They had lost their illusions of a perfect family, of an untouchable life, but they had gained something invaluable, the knowledge of their own resilience, the fierce strength of their bond, and the freedom to reinvent their lives together. "I love you, Victor," Eleanor whispered. leaning into him. "I love you too, Eleanor," he replied, holding her close. In their new quiet life, amidst the vast expanse of the desert, they embraced their newfound freedom, ready for whatever a genuine new dawn might bring.